Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is a PowerPoint tutorial about Western expansion, and we're going to be focusing on territories that are gained by the United States. What you're going to need to do here, again, I'm going to maximize the screen. When we come to a place on the slide where I leave a red underlined part, you're going to have to go ahead and type that in on your PowerPoint. In other words, you'll take notes as we go along. Again, Western expansion, these are some of our learning targets. We're going to explain the treaties and purchases that the United States added to its territories. We'll understand the meaning of manifest destiny and other various I can statements. Manifest destiny, a quote stated, "As a person gets older, their body grows taller and heavier. Shouldn't this be true with the nation as well?" Interestingly, as you look at the picture here, you can see all kind of information. You can see wagons, people headed out west. Here you see trains. Again, you have people working. You see wild animals. Native Americans seem to be running away from the wagons. Doesn't seem like these two cultures are merging together. And you have this almost angelic-looking lady kind of guiding everybody as they went out west, which was a point of manifest destiny, that the country was destined to earn and gain this land. So again, manifest destiny. First definition, the belief that the United States should spread from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific. So what you'll need to do here on your sheet, you can either type in at the beginning or at the end, either one is fine. But again, you'll need to type that in as we go along. So the belief that the U.S. should spread from the Atlantic to the Pacific coast. Some political reasons for expansion. Fear of Spain, France, Britain, and Mexico. The United States needed to expand. The United States needed to expand. So you would type in either at the start or the end, expand right here. The desire to spread the American way of life, and the desire to spread the institution of slavery. This was especially in the southern states. Sometimes what I did here, to make it easier, I've highlighted the terms and the words in red. That way you'll know where to type. Okay, some economic reasons for expansion. There was money to be made. There was money to be made. And again, the gold rush in California, logging industry, that brought jobs, farming brought jobs. Many rich land speculators bought huge tracts of land and sold it piece by piece for large profits. So again, there were many economic reasons for expansion. Here you see a man. Go back there, sorry. Here you see a man panning for gold. And again, this was in California. The possibility of gaining a large amount of money in a short time appealed to a lot of people. Thus, people went out west quickly. Some social reasons. Escape from religious persecution in the East. This dealt more with the Mormon population. Again, as they're being persecuted for their religious beliefs, they're pushed further westward. Also, the American belief that all people should own a plot of land. A plot of land to keep the country free. You might say that belief is still there today. Again, people feel successful if they own land. Adventure, cowboy living, freedom from runaway slaves, belief in the right of, quote, manifest destiny, the idea that expansion was for the good of the country and was the right of the country. That was a powerful motive for people to move westward. Some geographical reasons for expansion. Population growth in the eastern states. It was time to move west. Availability of cheap, fertile land. Cheap, fertile land. Cheaper and faster transportation. Cheaper and faster transportation. In other words, more river systems were used, steamboats, railroads, canals were dug. the famous Erie Canal. So these enabled people to move out west in a faster, more efficient manner. Also, knowledge of overland trails such as the Oregon and Santa Fe trails. So once people began to know the trail and the system, they felt more comfortable moving west. Again, I have up here, what two geographic obstacles stand in the way of westward expansion? Why would people want to go west? Again, you have population growth in the east. If you look at these arrows, you'll see that people wanted to expand westward. The population grew immensely in the east. People wanted to be more comfortable, move out west. You had cheap and fertile land. Cheap and fertile land. You had economic opportunities, such as mentioned before. You had the gold rush. You had the opportunity to purchase land and make a living from that. Many of the soil was drained from repeated cultivation in the south. You move a bit further west, the soil was in better condition. You had cheaper, faster transportation. In other words, it was more efficient to get out west. The overland trail routes. And again, so all these put together were a lot of reasons why people went west. We call that westward expansion. Put down here, do you think you would have attempted the journey? Yes or no? Okay, Americans found a new sense of pride following the War of 1812 and felt they both wanted and needed to expand. This once again was known as manifest destiny. So this was manifest destiny. Same picture that I had earlier. Again, what you'd want to put right over here would be west. West to the Pacific Ocean. That would be the westward goal. South to the Gulf of Mexico and the Rio Grande River. And this one, north into Canada. Some thought the entire continent should be part of the United States. Okay, the United States of America, just a bit of a background. Again, 1783. With the Treaty of Paris. With the Treaty of Paris, again, I should have made 3 dashes there. But with the Treaty of Paris, write that all in there, please. England recognized the 13 colonies as free and sovereign states and handed over all its territories east of the Mississippi. So when we look on the chart here, again, all this area, here's the Mississippi. All this land belonged to the United States, and this is, again, after the American Revolution. Again, some questions. Why did these early colonists settle where they did? Why do you think they were only allowed to claim land along the Atlantic coast? So take a second, pull out a sheet of paper, and jot down an answer here. Why did these early colonists settle where they did? So we're referring to the 13 original colonies. And why do you think they were only allowed to claim land along the Atlantic coast? So again, take a minute or two and go ahead and answer that. You'll want to go ahead and check your answers. First, colonists needed to be near water and trade routes. Again, people settled where they would be able to trade and they would have fresh water supplies. Also, you can only claim land on the Atlantic coast because You represent the settlers of the 13 original colonies. Again, you had to settle where it was approved that you could settle. All right, the United States after the Revolutionary War. As a result of defeating the British in the Revolutionary War, the United States obtained new territory between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi. Settlers who could not find land, is what you'd want to write in here, they could not find land, soon moved into this region. So again, here's the Mississippi River. This is after the American Revolution. And again, this land belongs to now the United States of America. Okay, 2 questions. Why did these citizens settle where they did? So we're not talking about citizens that were part of the original 13 colonies. This would be after the American Revolution, which ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Why did these citizens settle where they did? And then, what do you think should be done with the territories west of the Appalachian Mountains? So take a second on your paper, go ahead and jot down the answers. Okay, these citizens felt they had the right to claim land claims in the area despite objections by the Native Americans. Remember, many of the Native Americans had supported the British, so that the relations were not that great between many native tribes and the new United States government. Also, the area should be settled, in a type of orderly manner. And we will do that with the Northwest Ordinance. It was very proficient, and it worked. Okay, a little bit about Ohio, the frontier. Those who came through Ohio in the early 1800s were known as pioneers. Ohio becomes a state in 1803. The Northwest Ordinance, O-R-D-I-N-A-N-C-E. The Northwest Ordinance, that's in 1787, set up how people in the territories of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan, these are states that were carved out of that territory. The next blank, the Northwest Territory, again, that Northwest Territory was carved, these states, were carved from the Northwest Territory. All these states would eventually achieve statehood. The magic number was 60,000 people. And again, some of the specifics, there was no slavery, there was freedom of religion, trial by jury. But the main thing I want you to know here is that this land was carved up in an orderly, efficient manner. Okay, some important vocabulary the next 5 slides. Annexation, that means to add new land to a country by taking control of it. So again, this would add new land to a country by taking control of it. Cession, the act of giving up a territory that's ceding, usually as the result of a treaty. You can see the treaty there. Land purchase, land that is purchased or bought from another country that wishes to sell. So again, this is land that is purchased or bought from another country that wishes to sell. Okay, a treaty. This is a formal agreement between 2 or more nations. A formal agreement between 2 or more nations. Migration, the movement of people from one part of the world to another. Okay, the Louisiana Purchase. This will be our first purchase. We're going to go through a number of them. This will be the next 8 slides. The Louisiana Purchase. Jefferson bought this whole territory from France. and it doubled the size of the United States. So again, this whole area in purple, the Louisiana Territory, this would be purchased from Napoleon for $15 million. Goods could now be shipped down rivers. You want to fill in rivers here to the eastern states. So again, with this purchase, these river systems, everything dumps out into the Mississippi. Again, here's the Ohio, the modern-day state of Ohio, the Ohio River. Everything dumps into the Mississippi, goes through the port at New Orleans, and you can see by the black line here, this enables goods to be traded in various areas. This also created new trade routes out west. So again, as this territory was explored and examined, this enabled new routes as people traveled out west. Notice this is St. Louis, Missouri. This was the staging point of this journey. In 1803, President Jefferson purchased the Louisiana Territory from the French leader Napoleon for $15 million. So you'd write in or type in Napoleon here. The Louisiana Purchase more than doubled the size of the U.S. In the Lewis and Clark expedition, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, they explored. You want to type in explored the Louisiana Purchase from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. So just a map of the country. This is Spanish territory. You have Louisiana Territory, land belonging to the United States. But again, this land is going to be explored. One of the main goals was to find the source of the Missouri River here, how to get across the Rockies, which was geographically challenging. Okay, on your sheet of paper, why did pioneers settle where they did? What conflicts would now happen with the Native Americans? So take a second, pause, and think about why did pioneers settle where they did and what conflicts would now happen with the Native Americans? Some answers. Manifest Destiny believed that the United States should own from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Some natives would sell the land and some would fight. Natives would be pushed westward until there was nowhere to go. And again, this will stir up conflicts with the Native Americans. Okay, also on your sheet, I want you to take a second, and you might want to pause the tutorial video, but go back and write down and state some geographic gains from the Louisiana Purchase, some economic gains, and also some political gains. So you're going to want to take a minute or two, again, pause it, and think through the Louisiana Purchase and how there were a number of gains for the United States. Okay, the Adams-Onis Treaty. This is basically how we acquired the modern-day state of Florida. This was in 1819. This will be the next 6 slides. Realizing they had little choice, Spain. You want to type in Spain here. Spain gave Florida to the United States through a treaty. This is called the Adams-Onis Treaty. And if you look at the bottom here, this was land that was occupied, where I'm circling with the pointer, this was occupied by Spain. And again, this land here was also owned by Spain as well. Okay, should the United States have U.S. troops defend the border between Georgia and Florida? Send U.S. troops into Florida after the Seminole Indians? Or negotiate with the Spanish to see if they will sell Florida to the United States? So take a second, think through this. What would be your guess? The answer is General Andrew Jackson. He marched to Florida. So you want to type in Florida here. He marched to Florida to put an end to Seminole. These are Indian raids. He attacks the Spanish capital. Through a treaty, this is called the Adams-Onis Treaty, the Spanish agree to give up their claim to Florida for $5 million, and the United States also agrees to pay the claims against the Spanish government brought on by American citizens. So a number of the citizens in the area were upset with the Spanish for provoking the natives, for raiding Georgia, and the U.S. agreed not only to purchase this territory. Again, Spain gave up their claim to Florida for $5 million, but the United States also paid back its own citizens. Okay, on your sheet of paper, just think through some of these questions. Why did the United States want to acquire Florida? Should Spain just lose Florida or all of its holdings such as Texas, California, etc.? So go ahead and think on your paper these two questions. Again, why did the U.S. want to acquire Florida? It did that because it wanted to protect the state of Georgia and to stop slaves from escaping to the area. This was a part of Manifest Destiny. As far as Spain losing Florida or all of its holdings, Spain only lost Florida at this point. It did keep its other holdings. That will change in a handful of years, though. Okay, so also on your paper, you'll want to stop, pause the video, and think through some geographic, economic, and political gains that the United States obtained through the Adams-Onis Treaty. Okay, Texas annexation. This will be the next 8 slides. Texas became independent from Mexico in 1836. This is after the Alamo, and was later annexed. You'll type in annexed here by the United States. So it was absorbed into the country. At this point, you could see Texas is southwest of the mainland part of the United States. During the 1820s, many Americans began moving to Texas. Texas at this point was controlled by Mexico. You want to type in Mexico here. Mexico will win its independence from Spain later. In 1836, Texas won its independence in a war with Mexico and became an independent republic. An independent republic. So you want to type in republic here. Many Americans, especially in the South, thought that Texas should become part of the United States, simply because many of the people that were living in Texas were Americans. Others in the North worried that it would cause problems between the United States and Mexico. They were worried that this would cause cultural and political issues, that they didn't feel the country was able to handle these things at that particular time. It was kind of an odd situation. Many Americans left for Texas to be ranchers. Some ran from the law. But these were a hardy, a rough kind of people that went to Texas. They lived in Texas as Mexican citizens. Only after the Alamo did they think about actually separating from Texas. In 1845, President John Taylor decided he must act. John Taylor was the 10th president of the United States. And this is, what do we do? Does Texas become annexed, absorbed into the U.S. or not? The North, the South disagreed. John Taylor had to act on this. What should President Taylor do? Should he ask Congress to approve annexing Texas? Should he help Mexico regain control of Texas, or ignore the request to make Texas part of the United States? Go ahead and think. The answer is, due to popular support to add Texas to the United States, President Tyler, apologize for the typo earlier, asked Congress to vote. Congress quickly approved the measure, and Texans, they voted. Texans voted to join the United States. If you want to type in voted here. Okay, on your paper, go ahead and think about these two questions. Why would someone settle in Texas? And should Texas have stayed as a republic, or should they have joined the Union? Again, why would somebody settle in Texas? Some were trying to get away from the law, to find adventure, to make a living as a farmer or rancher. Should Texas have stayed as a republic or joined the Union? The most common answer would be that Texas and the U.S. had much in common, and it was best for Texas to join the Union. Texas is a very large state. If you drive from the south to the north, the day will end before you get to the north. Again, it was such a large state, many felt that if Texas was not annexed, it could possibly become its own country one day. So it was probably best that Texas did become part of the United States. Okay, on your paper, you're going to want to think about some of the geographic, economic, and political gains. So go ahead and jot an answer down for each one of these, and how Texas and how it was annexed added to the strength of the United States. Okay, the Oregon Treaty. This is the next 8 slides. You can see the Oregon territory, or Oregon country, in the northwest part of the United States. The United States and Great Britain, they divided. You want to type in divided the Oregon territory. So again, as people move west, I apologize about this. As people moved west, the Northwest Territory, more and more people flooded the area. At first by mainly mountain men or fur trappers. There was some disagreement about who would own that land. The United States and Great Britain, they disagreed. You want to type in disagreed over who controlled Oregon country. Settlers from both countries were living in Oregon, but most were Americans. So you had the British and Americans living in this territory, but most were Americans. And you want to type that in here. You can see the line. This is what we now know is the top of the United States, the 49th degree. But again, all this area was disputed. It would have looked strange, I guess, had the United States shot up north here and then come back down. But again, at this point, there were no dividing lines, and it was uncertain about who owned what. Americans pressured President James Polk to annex Oregon country. Polk, again, was the 11th president of the United States. Okay, so what should President Polk do? Should he send soldiers to Oregon country so that the territory could be annexed? Ask Congress to divide the Oregon country between Britain and the U.S., or sell the Oregon country to the British for $15 million? Polk offered to divide. We keep coming back to that term, but he'll divide the territory with Britain in a treaty. This is called the Oregon Treaty. The two countries agreed that the 49th parallel would be the boundary. So once again, just kind of see where this red line is at. This would be the dividing line, and it was relatively peaceful. So, who would settle in this new area? And did this treaty create a lasting peace with Britain? Explain. So go ahead on your sheet of paper. Go ahead and put down what you would think would be the answers to these two questions. As far as who would settle in this area, many settlers were mountain men who made a living trading and trapping furs. Did this treaty create a lasting peace with Britain? This treaty avoided war and created peace between the two nations. Good relations between the two nations will generally result in the near future. So go ahead and put down for the Oregon Treaty some of the geographic, economic, and political gains from this treaty. Remember, up at this point, we've covered treaties and purchases. So take some time, go ahead and fill this in. Okay, the Mexican cession. This will be the next 7 slides. War with Mexico, you want to type in Mexico here, resulted in California and the Southwest Territory becoming part of the United States. Again, you could see Texas, this was annexed, but you still have all this area over here. What we now know as California, Arizona, New Mexico. This area is currently owned by Mexico. Another small purchase is the Gadsden Purchase. The United States bought this from Mexico to use for their railroad lines. You want to type in railroad. This is just this little tiny strip of land over where I'm circling. And this was used to, we built a railroad, and as with other methods of transportation, this helped further trade. Okay, a little bit more background information. Again, since Texas became independent from Mexico in 1836, there was conflict between the United States and Mexico about the boundary. So if you look at Texas here, this darkened area here, this was claimed by Mexico. Well, things were also claimed by the United States, so it wasn't very certain. So this was touchy. And as one could imagine, Mexicans were upset by losing Texas. Mexico insisted the border was at the Nueces River. Texans insisted the border was 150 miles south along the Rio Grande. Once again, Americans expected President Polk to promote westward expansion. I should have highlighted that here, but you'll want to type in expansion. So Americans expected President Polk to promote westward expansion and go to war. So what should President Polk do? Should he negotiate with Mexico to establish a new southern border for Texas? Offer to buy the area between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande from Mexico? Or send troops into Texas to maintain the border along the Rio Grande? In 1846, Polk sent troops. You're going to want to type in troops here. He decides to send in troops to the Rio Grande. War breaks out, and after 2 years of war, the United States captures Mexico City. So you want to type in Mexico City right here, and they'll win the war. So it's a relatively short war. In the peace treaty, Mexico recognized the Rio Grande as the southern border of Texas, the southern border. So again, here's the Rio Grande where I'm tracing the arrow. Mexico realized that as the southern border of Texas. The United States pays Mexico $15 million. And again, this was the treaty. It's kind of a hard word, but Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Guadalupe hyphen Hildalgo. This was called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, or the Mexican Cession. This resulted from the Mexican War. And then 5 years later, the United States pays $10 million to Mexico for the Gadsden Purchase. This land was used to build railroad lines to better transport people and goods. So 2 words here, used to build railroad lines to better transport people and goods. So again, the Mexican territory, all this area was given, sold to the United States. This red area here, this would be the Gadsden Purchase. So go ahead at this time, take a second, think about some geographic, economic, and political gains from the Mexican Cession, or another way of looking at it would be the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So, in only 70 years, from 1783 to 1853, the United States expanded dramatically. By 1853, the total size of the republic approximately, you want to type in tripled. The size of our country or republic, we tripled. A tremendous a lot of land that was gained through westward expansion, through treaties and purchases. Was there anything left to acquire? One might ask. One would be, and this is what you'll type in, Alaska, and Hawaii. So this came after the fact. You can see Alaska was in 1867, Hawaii in 1898. But again, these 2 areas will add to the United States. Alaska comes in, it's purchased from Russia, and it's many years later, it's admitted as a state in 1959, not all that long ago. Hawaii is annexed in 1898, and also in 1959 it's admitted as a state. All right, so westward movement and westward expansion. What about slavery? How did all this play out? Remember, what different territories did the United States acquire? We had the Louisiana Purchase, the Florida Purchase, that's the Adams-Onis Treaty, the Oregon Treaty. The Oregon Treaty would also be known as the Northwest Territory Treaty, the annexation of Texas, and the Mexican Cession, or the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. As Americans moved out west, the United States added more territories. This raised the issue of whether or not these new states would be free states, you want to type in free states, or slave states. So this is going to upset the balance of power in Congress. The national government passed legislation that affected the institution of slavery in the territories. So as people move out west, as land is in territory becomes a state, will it be a free or slave state? And this upset people back east in Congress. And this will be one of the causes for the Civil War. Thank you for listening to the video tutorial on westward expansion and treaties and purchases.